Welcome anyone that's just joined us. Resilience. So what's resilience? Resilience is our ability to bounce back from difficult circumstances. We always want to avoid difficult circumstances, but unfortunately, if we live on this planet, they arrive without being bidden. So resilience is the technique of how to deal with adversity and come back and continue. So it's really a lot related to perseverance. And so I'm going to give you a little quote, and this is related. And what I'm going to do tonight is just go through some points of Buddhist thought. The Buddha taught 84,000 teachings to cover our 84,000 delusions. We haven't got quite time to go through all that tonight, so I'll give you some basic kind of outlines just to have a think about when we've had difficult circumstances or we've had disappointment, just how to pick yourself up and keep going. Because one of the most important things is perseverance, to keep going. So, and these hopefully will be practical. Look, the whole purpose of Buddhism is to really attain enlightenment and help every other being to attain enlightenment. But Buddhism is very practical. The Buddha taught for over 50 years and was able to teach directly about how to deal with life's difficulties. So we've got this very altruistic point of view, bodhicitta motivation to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all. But we also need to be able to survive in today's world. And the world is constantly changing. And so what we need to do is some techniques to deal with that, or ways of thinking. So one of the most important things is our inner strength of adaptability, because there's always change. And in fact, I'll give you this quote. This is by a guy called Jack Rubin, and he said, "Humans dreamed up a thing called permanence." We actually created this idea of permanence. A word with no actual refer. And actually, there is nothing in the world that's permanent. And so we've created this illusion of permanence. And he goes on to say, "And then gnashed their teeth and wept and accused the universe of being senseless because it didn't abide by their wishful conceit." In other words, we keep thinking, why isn't it permanent? So the first thing that I want to talk about is impermanence. Getting used to that. It's a really powerful understanding. You know, anyone that's got a Rolls Royce out there, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's going to rust out. Okay? Even if you think it's a permanent car, even if the advertising tells you it's going to last forever, it's not. And so we need to be able to recognise that things constantly change. Once we get used to that, when things fall apart, which they constantly do, then we can actually go, okay, that's the way things are. There was a very famous Tibetan yogi called Milarepa. And Milarepa had virtually nothing in his life except rags and a bowl that he cooked his food in. And he actually cooked nettles because he didn't have any other food. And they reckon he ate so many nettles that he turned slightly green. Anyway, he walked out of his cave one day and he kicked over his only possession and broke his bowl. So the only thing he owned was this bowl, and he broke it. And they reckon his disciples who were with him in the cave said that he was jumping around going, "Oh, impermanence, fantastic." So he saw it as a realisation. He didn't see it as a disaster. And this is the way that we can change our mind. Instead of seeing something as negative, we can actually have the ability with our own minds to change it. We can look outside and it's raining and we think, "Oh, I really wanted to go on a picnic. I want to have a good time." And the farmer goes, "Oh, I got some rain, isn't that great?" It's our interface with the world that changes it into suffering or happiness. Tibetan Lama Zopa, who brought Tibetan Buddhism to Australia actually in the 70s, he said, "Good karma is followed by bad karma, followed by good karma. Get used to it." We always think, "Oh, if only I do this, this will be fine. This will work. If I just get this promotion, then I'll be happy." In fact, a book I've always wanted to write, and one of the chapters in it was, if only. If only, then I'll be happy. If only I could own this. If only I could get that. If only I could have this person in my life, then I'll be happy. And it doesn't work like that. Because what we're doing is we're attaching ourselves to something that's impermanent. And that becomes the problem. So we need to be able to look at that very directly and say, okay, this is the way things are. But the good news about impermanence is that when we're in suffering, if we've ever had a time where we've felt very depressed or we've been suffering, we often think, oh, this is going to go on forever. This is just going to go on. No, it won't. It will change. And so we have to reassure ourselves, particularly, and this is part of resilience, reassure ourselves that we need to be able to let go this idea of, oh, this is going to go on forever. This will never change. It always changes. And so it's this grasping towards having things permanent and the grasping towards not having things permanent. You know, in other words, being absolutely hooked into this idea that everything's going to stay and I don't want anything to change. So it's a grasping on both sides of the fence in a way. It's like grasping towards permanence and then grasping towards, oh my goodness, I'm not going to keep this. This isn't going to be fantastic for me forever. And so this grasping is part of the idea where we need to be able to let go, this understanding that things don't exist forever. So happiness doesn't exist forever in terms of our material comforts. Ultimately, the Buddha said that we can achieve happiness, but it's when we completely let go of the desire or grasping towards happiness. So it's kind of counterintuitive in many ways that we actually have to let it go to be able to achieve it. And so, in a sense, we need to not get overly excited about the good results and incredibly depressed about the bad results. We need to be able to let that go. And once we start to let that go, we can have a degree of peace in our minds. True happiness is actually not something that we've just got or a bit of food that we've just got. It's a sense of contentment. We need to be able to achieve this sense of contentment to be able to traverse life's difficulties and come back and keep coming back and going, okay, I'm going to persevere. Great Shantideva, the 8th century master, Buddhist master, this is without a doubt the best line in stress management I've ever come across. He said, if it can be fixed, why worry? If it can't be fixed, why worry? And so that clears a lot of stuff off our plate, actually. You can clear half your desk by just saying, can I fix it? No, I can't fix it. Well, okay, I'm going to forget about it. I'm actually not going to worry about it. We spend a lot of time worrying about the future, the what ifs. And guess what? Worry is not planning. I'm being a businessman here. Worry is not planning. Worrying is making this fantasy in your head of what if's going to happen, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Planning is going, okay, I'm going to look at what the possibilities where this could go wrong, and I'm actually going to make contingencies the best I can to make sure that doesn't happen. So if you're sitting around worrying, you're not doing anything. It's a useless exercise, and then feeling guilty about things that have happened. I do believe that we should have intelligent regret. This is where we look at what we've done in the past, the skillful things and the unskillful things, and go, okay, I'm going to do more of the skillful things and I'm going to do less of the unskillful things. And that thing that I just did yesterday was really unskillful. I said something to somebody and I regret doing it. Okay, now I'm going to make a determination not to do it again. I'm not going to start feeling guilty about it. One Tibetan monk said to me once, he said, guilt is like getting into the car, wanting to drive it and not starting the engine. You just sit around and feel bad for yourself. And some people actually think that feeling guilty is an action. Oh, well, I felt guilty about it. Well, so what? What you need to do is go, okay, that was an unskillful action. I'm not going to do that again. And that's another technique of starting to understand how to build the confidence in your life to go forward and do your practices and be useful in the community, because that's what it's about. It's fine sitting on our cushions. We need to do the meditations, we need to do the practice, but we also need to interface with human beings and work out how best we can be a benefit to them. And the interesting thing is, if we're benefit to others, we're benefit to ourselves. If we're beneficial to ourselves, we're actually beneficial to others. So it works both ways. If we're being greedy and we're grasping, then it affects us, but it affects everyone else around us. So really the cause of our unhappiness is our attachment. We attach ourselves to things. And this is the technique of being able to, or the Buddhist techniques are able to let go of the attachment. If you're attached to a rainbow, I've said this before in other talks, if you see a rainbow and you're really attached to capturing it with your phone, what's happening? You start to disconnect from the experience of looking at a rainbow. I'm not saying people shouldn't take photos, but if you spend your time photographing things where you can experience them directly, you're starting to disengage with actual joy. I remember a number of years ago I was in Bali, and there was this wonderful performance of dancers, fabulous performance, and so many people were standing up with their phones trying to capture the performance, and I felt like saying, the performance is there. When you go home and you see it on a little box, it's not going to be as enjoyable as being present. And so the joy that we can have in simple things is really important to build up, in a sense, a contentment with the world. Trying to capture things constantly and making them solid, and then going home and saying to people, look at the dances I saw, and they go, oh yeah, great, yeah, fabulous, thanks for that. Where we could have just been absolutely in the moment. And so this spontaneousness is related to mindfulness, and this is the next subject I want to talk about. Being mindful. So here you go. We don't have a past. A past is a memory. It doesn't physically exist. And we never, ever get to the future. There is no future. We talk about the future, and even in our thinking, we think about the future, but we actually never live in the future. None of us are here tomorrow. We're actually here now. And we need to be able to develop this technique of really looking at what's going on right now. Human beings live their lives in the future and in the past. It's a habit. And it doesn't work for us in the end. There is no contentment living in the what ifs, as I said in the chapter in the book. What if, then I'll be happy? What if this person was in my life? Oh, if only I was married to this person. I'm going to be radical here. Oh, if only I was divorced from this person. I don't want to paint a bleak picture, but we constantly do this. So we need to bring our minds back to the present. We need to completely do that. There's a very famous poet called Gary Schneider, a beat poet in the 1950s, probably a little before some of you were born. In fact, all of you were born. And he spent 10 years going to a Zen monastery. And they asked him after, and he went from America to Japan, and he'd come back, and he'd even spent 12 months there meditating. And they said to him, and he's still alive, about 98, and they said, what is your practice? And he said, oh, that's easy. He said, when I'm walking down the street, I say to myself, what's going on now, mind? What's happening with your mind now? He actually looks at himself. So we can do this naturally. This is the part of the practice of being mindful. What is my mind thinking now? Am I thinking negatively? Am I being jealous? Am I being angry? Am I being frustrated? All these things ruin our health. And on a practical level, all the time we start thinking negatively about things, we are pumping out really nasty hormones in our body. One of them being cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that's related to the fight or flight mechanism. And it's there to pump blood around the body very quickly to run away from the danger. But if we're under constant stress, the constant worry and stress, then we're pumping out these hormones that are actually detrimental to our health. So the mind not only causes mental suffering, but it also causes physical suffering. They talk in Buddhism about the two sufferings. I don't know if you've heard about this. You bang your finger, that's suffering, that hurts. And then you worry about having a sore finger, and maybe it'll get infected, and maybe I'm going to have a problem with it. And so that's known as the second suffering. And we need to be able to let that go. If it starts getting infected, we go to a doctor and get it fixed. But if we start worrying about all the possibilities of things that can go wrong, then we're constantly in this state of agitation. And agitation is something that we don't need. Agitation is the bringer of all bad conditions. When we're agitated, we don't have good decisions. We don't have good communication because we can get grumpy easily. All the things we don't need comes from an agitated mind. And from a calm mind are all the things that we do need. Good communication, love, compassion, all the things that we need in life come from a calm mind. So the practice of mindfulness, brought about by meditation, is this ability to really start to let go of the stuff and really calm the mind. And being present is the most powerful technique that you can do for your life. So here's something I want you all to do. I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to go for a walk, and I want you to not take your phone. Because if you're walking and talking to someone about some stressful situation, you are not being present. By all means, talk to the person, but don't walk in the woods or in the garden or in a park and not be present to the experience. You're missing it. You can't do it in the future, you can only do it now. And I'm going to tell you an interesting story about being present, because I think this is really powerful. And this is a lecture I was giving in Melbourne to a company. It was an engineering company. And what they did is they built what they call capstans. Now, a capstan is this huge bollard that they wrap ropes around to drag huge tankers in. And I was talking to these engineers, it was on stress management, and I said to these engineers, are any questions? And at the end, one of them said, oh, look, I think you need to go and talk to our troubleshooter. I said, oh, who's the troubleshooter? He said, oh, he's in the workshop, he couldn't make it. And he said, he's the most relaxed guy in the company. And I went, what, the troubleshooter? And he went, yeah, absolutely. So I said, okay. So I found this guy who was a really laid back guy. And I said to him, so do you have a lot of stress in your life? He said, oh yeah. He said, whenever something breaks down, they fly me across, this is pre-COVID, fly me across the world. And I said, well, give me an instance. And he said, okay, well, 2 weeks ago I was in Brazil, and one of the capstans, this huge thing, the size of a room, he said broke down, the electronics broke. And he said, I had 2 hours to fix it, or it was going to cost $6 million. And I went, what? And he said, I couldn't figure it out. I said, so what did you do? And he said, oh, I do what I always do. He said, I found a corner of the wharf. I sat down and I jumped in and said, oh, what, solve it? He said, that's exactly what I don't do. He said, I just sit there and completely empty my mind. And he said, guess what? The solution always comes up. He said, I've trained my whole team to do this. And I said, do you know what this is called? And he said, no. I said, that's called meditation. He said, oh, I've often wondered what it was. He had found the meditation as the solution to his stress. Bingo. He didn't go, oh, okay, what have I got to do? What have I got to do? Once you start doing that, you lose your creativity and you use your ability to think. And so what he did, he just sat down, completely relaxed and emptied his mind. And he was a really relaxed guy. This is how he lived his life, which is fantastic. He's actually achieved what most of us are trying to do, is have a comfortable, easy life. And yet he was the man with the most stress in the whole of this company. So yeah, it's this development of being present. And we don't just have to train it in meditation. We can be present doing anything. We can be present cooking dinner. We can be present, as I said, going for a walk. We can be present crossing the street. I saw a woman today, unfortunately, crossing the street talking on the phone and didn't get hit, but it was a bit close. And I thought, if you hadn't have done that, you would have been aware that there was a car coming. And so we need to really come back to this idea of being mindful, being present. And meditation is the process. Single pointed concentration develops your awareness of being now. And there's no downside to that. You can achieve this very, very easily by just continually tapping on the door and then saying to yourself, what am I doing now, mind? Am I worrying about the future? Am I feeling terrible about the past? Or can I just be present right now to what's going on? We become more and more essential with our lives, and we can get rid of stuff. Okay, so